This is Vivek's first book. Now, Vivek was a PhD student here in polymers, and I didn't even know what polymers were until I met him. But he couldn't take our classes. He couldn't take them in our classes officially. But he would just come around with poems. He told me today that I looked at for the 3 or so years he was here and I was here together, about 135 of his poems that I looked at and went through individually, one by one. I used to try to hide from this guy sometimes. I'd be sitting in my office, I'd look up, and here's this guy like smiling with this grin on his face that's standing in my office door. But he's a terrific poet and became a good friend when he was here. And this, like I said, Saga of a Crumpled Piece of Paper, his first book. Now, he's a professor of chemical engineering at the University of Chicago in Illinois, and he's a poet. There's a lot of examples of poets like that, and scientists doing both. There's no problem with that. Please welcome first Vivek Sharma.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm really excited to be back. I spent 5 years in Georgia Tech and learned a lot of things, including things about science, engineering, teaching, and also poetry. And in the beginning today, I'm going to do what we traditionally do in India when we start reading our work. So we first make an invocation to our teachers. And in my case, the teacher for poetry was Thomas Lux, who I always call Gurudev. And Gurudev means teacher God. That's also a phrase we would use for Rabindranath Tagore. And so the way I've tried to give tribute to Thomas Lux's influence on my work is by trying to translate his poems into Hindi, which is another language I write in. So the first poem, I'll first recite a Thomas Lux poem in English, then my translation, and after that, I'll recite my poems in English. So first poem is by Thomas Lux. It's the little towns I like. And I apologize if I can't read it as well as you do, but I'll try. It's the little towns I like, with the little mills making ratchets and stanchions, elastic web, spindles, you name it. I like them in New England, America, particularly providing bad jobs good enough to live in. Families even, kindergarten, church suppers, beach umbrellas. The towns are real, so fragile in their loneliness. A flood could come along, and floods have, and cut them in two, in half. There is no mayor. The town council's not prepared for this. 3 of the 4 policemen are stranded on their roofs, and it doesn't stop raining. The mountain is so thick with water, parts of it just slide down on the heifers, soggy, suicidal, in the pastures below. It rains in these towns, and because there is no other way, your father gets in a rowboat so he can go to work. So now I'll read the translation, and I hope there are at least few Indians who can understand the translation. बहुत भाते हैं मुझे छोटे शहर, बहुत भाते हैं मुझे छोटे शहर, जिनके छोटे छोटे कारखाने उगलते हैं, पुर्चे और पेच, लचीले रेशम, धुरियां, रीलें, तुम नाम लो. मुझे भाते हैं वो न्यू इंग्लैंड अमेरिका में, मुख्यतः ऐसी घटिया चाकरियां जो जीने का गुजारे लायक साधन दें परिवारों तक को. प्राइमरी स्कूल, चर्च के लंगर, सागर तक के खोखे, शहर सत्य हैं अपने अकेलेपन में कितने नाजुक. एक बाढ़ आ सकती है, बाढ़ें आई भी हैं और चीर सकती है इन्हें 2 टुकड़ों में. कोई मेयर साहब नहीं, नगर पालिका तैयार नहीं इसके लिए. 4 में से 3 पुलसिए हैं छत पे फंसे हुए, और बरखा है कि रुकती नहीं. पर्वत हैं पानी से सरोवर इतने कि उनके टुकड़े बस फिसल जाते हैं सांडों पर. भीगे आत्मघाती जो चढ़ते नीचे मैदानों पर. बरसता है इन शहरों पर, और चूंकि कोई रास्ता नहीं, तुम्हारे पिताजी नाव में बैठ जाते हैं ताकि दफ्तर जा सके. So I'll follow up this with sort of tribute to ancestors and the place where I come from. So I grew up in Himachal Pradesh. It's a state in north of India in the Himalayas. And this poem is about conversations with my grandmother. And the word for grandmother in Hindi is dadi. So you will hear the word dadi every now and then, and it means father's mother. The earth is like an onion. So this is dedicated to my dadi. In 2005, I traveled over 8,000 miles over Europe, Middle East, and Atlantic, over lands Catholic and prehistoric, by air, train, bus, bullock cart, on foot, to arrive at my village in the Himalayas. My grandmother inspected me with a widow's eyes and offered me goat milk tea, drenched with tears. I was asked to explain how far was I from a distant cousin in London and from another uncle in Africa. Her elder sister too strained her ears. I offered distances in kilometers. Their gaze failed to see the thousands I spoke of. For them, Delhi, 400 kilometers away, was far off horizon, and they barely knew much counting. So I asked them to forget about distances and think time. I told them of the time difference between nations. Intrigued, the elder one asked, "Why do the damn watches behave differently?" Neither the time difference nor the number of miles meant anything. So I grabbed a stick and, after carving nations on earth, pointed out India, America. My cartography was as useless to them as my talk about how distant we had become, separated by education and more. An unsolved problem of explaining stuff before a future professor of physics, I told myself. Try harder. I asked my dadi if she had anything spherical at hand. Dadi rummaged through the house, recounting stories about balls brought and lost by her many grandchildren. Frustrated, she concluded, "Forget it. Far is the other world. Why worry about it?" Then I found an onion and brought out a flashlight. "See, grandmas," I said, "the earth is like an onion and the sun is like this flashlight, only much bigger." I took a pen and drew continents and oceans and lectured. The earth is like an onion and it spins like a top, once a day. The grandmas followed the rays from the battery-powered sun, watched the shadow of the onion, and saw rotation of earth as a harbinger of fun. Here, sun is rising in India while America is sleeping. Africa must wait for its dawn, and London, once lit, isn't now so. And now it is. "Oh, close to death, old woman," said my delighted dadi. "Goddess Earth is like an onion and rotates. My grandson suggests that sun is no god riding a chariot as we thought." The two sisters, with their life's wrinkles on them, are hooked to my demonstration. Excited to show them more, I find a grape and call it Chanda Mama, the moon uncle. Aryabhatta, Kepler, Galileo, and Copernicus smile. I was repeating their words, translated into Pahadi. Soon the sisters discovered the eclipses. The elder one remarked, "Why, the younger widowed one, the accursed Rahu doesn't swallow the sun during the eclipse." Both then praised gods for incredible things Americans taught me. I returned to my parents' house and narrated this story to my mother. She clapped her hands, burst out laughing, explained to me, "Oh son, by now the whole village must have seen that onion." The onion, like the earth, moves from hand to hand. My grandmother carries the torchlight, and she's teaching people how to make night and day. So coming from India, there are all these poetry forms that are very particular to Hindi language, Urdu language. And I grew up listening to a lot of ghazals. And then Gurudev Lux introduced me to the idea of English ghazals or anglicized ghazals. And this is an example of an anglicized ghazal. "Commit to amnesia my name. Forget me, forget my voice, forget my smell, my face. Forget me, forget my voice, forget my smell, my face, commit to amnesia my name. Just memorize my guzzle. My flesh is like a parchment. It wanes with time. Don't leave me on a printed page. Internalize my guzzle. Isn't guzzle the dying call of a dying deer to its beloved? Isn't guzzle the dying call of a dying deer to its beloved? It's formally a rhyming lament. Why penalize my guzzle? It's a string of couplets. Strum it with your voice. To comprehend my allegories, symphonize my guzzle. In English, I lack melody. In translation, I lack sense. For an unadulterated rendering, as an Indian, realize my guzzle. Don't ask to recite on street. Don't ask me to recite on street. It's liquor on empty stomach. Invite me home. Savor in moonlight. Aphrodisiac spice my guzzle. Sold her own flesh Umrao Jan. At a kotha composed Umrao Jan. Verses more popular than hymns. That immortality eyes my guzzle. Hafiz, Ghalib had God's gift. Shahid, Faz acquired their skill. Vivek has neither gift nor skill. Don't idolize my guzzle. So now I'll shift gears a little bit, and this poem is more like a confession read out by a 14-year-old in a court. And so even though it's in my voice, it's a confession read by a 14-year-old female in a court. Foul play at 14. He said in his dialect, I own your lands and hands, and your flesh and bones, and your feelings too. I sleep each night with my wives. I have 4. I can keep you as 5th, or as a mistress. Stay tonight, tomorrow go. You'll see I'll be touched. I'm a sentimental fellow. Your ma is a tyrannical so, your pa is a regular pimp, but all that you already know. Don't cry, silly. A filly as fine as you will fetch a handsome beggar catch. No one will dare to wince, to feast on what this prince tasted once and let go. Your mother did not wince. Your father brought her first, 4 nights ago. She begged that you be spared. My thirst is deep, little one. Don't weep. We've done the deed. Sleep. He said all that and good night and laid down next to me. When he began to snore, I scoured his eyes with a butcher's knife. Hang me. Set me free. So after spending 5 years in Atlanta, in Georgia Tech, I went on to do a postdoc in MIT. And one thing you notice when you get to MIT is that they have lots of bars around MIT. And engineers drink a lot more, and they spend a lot more time in bars. And the next poem is an example of what kind of things you see in those bars around MIT. The title is Bottoms Up Girl. On a bar stool sits a contortionist, raises her left leg, and her shoes and eyes are brandished before my face. In this drunk circus, I'm a clown lion, while eyes around us applaud her poise. Her leg dances down, and then she arches her back in a practiced invitation. In my dark beer, bubbles rise into a mist of expectation. But I am a reluctant sensualist. She's a bottoms-up girl, and I drink in slow sips. We rehearse her act of evolving artifice. She shows the ductility of her right hips and knees. I fudge lines of the drunk poets of the East. Now her body is the rhythm of chatter about us. Now the orgasm of the brute thoughts unites us. And then she nearly faints as her boyfriend surprised her. I recognize the man, my childhood friend, who insists in his fiancée he sees a wife, envy of traditionalists. I toast to him, a woe, she's not my ass type. As they leave, she winks. I stammer a goodbye. I repeat as I grapple with my phantasmal crisis. She's a bottoms-up girl, and I drink in slow sips. So now I'll return back to the village, and there's going to be one more poem after this, but this village poem is titled Haircut Revolution. And this is about something that was true 25 years ago when women wore veils, and you'll hear lots of Hindi words. The main word that you need to know is bahu, which is daughter-in-law, and nav bahu is a new daughter-in-law. Okay. A haircut revolution. When Pa's cousin's wife Rati got a boycott haircut, all 50 villages and nearly all clans 5,000 tongues christened her possessed. I was 7, city bred. My 4-year-old sister had afro curls on her head. We were spending the summer with grandma at her ancestral shed. I recall the day when grandma's sister trekked 9 miles. She kept a fast for God Shiva every Monday. She was hungry and angry. She wept all the way, chastising gods for betraying her. So loudly she wept or howled, we heard her approach from miles away. The villagers grappled with what she had confessed. Her son was trapped. He kept a veilless wife who rides a scooter like a harlot. Must be possessed, grumbled the villagers. Decades later, the haircut seems a watershed event. Now the villagers go to salons and carry no veils on their head. Back then, hair stayed under the veil. Scissors never scaled a female's head. Dadi's third sister, who lived close by, joined them as they wept and cursed their husbands, long dead. While Ma lives in a cowshed, that whore lives in a townhouse. After Bahu's haircut, all villages are spitting thu at us. To save face, let us prove Rati is possessed. Find an ash-filled locket below a pillow or in a pocket, sneakily kept by somebody Bahu couldn't suspect. Or blame a promise made but not kept to the fertility goddess. Or find a doctor to say there's a defect in Bahu's head. The sisters said women killed, fucked, eloped, or wore jeans when possessed. They praised an Ojha, said he was a terror to the possessed. His tantra swept evil spirits away. My grandma said his mantras are feared in lakhs of villages. One sister then spoke of a woman and her Nabbahu who visited this Ojha's shed. Regularly at first, but noticing Ojha's leering eyes, Nabbahu avoided his cowshed by faking headaches. This pinch of ash will cure her, said the Ojha. Nabbahu kept that ash aside and later rubbed it on her buffalo's forehead. Through the villages, the beast sped. It broke the wall to get to Ojha's bed. My grandma is headstrong. She dismissed this as a false tale and proclaimed, enough, we've wept. Let's go and beat the Devi's Laltin lamps out of that hussy's head. Possessed? My ass. She needs a hiding and your son needs some too. Hush. Possessed, we'll call her, said grandma's sister. Or she'll turn to police and shed who knows what skins. Third whispered, let's claim we've progressed. We've kept enough. In this Kalyuga of train and TV, do you think our notions will be kept? Scowled the oldest sister. Hush! Have you turned senile? Or straw fills your head? Let the sinners rot in atheist cities. The virtuous like us will prosper in villages. Indoors, my ma wept. My sister held up her cropped curly hair. Ma, am I possessed? Ma smiled. No, beta. In village, bhoot, which means ghost, past. In villages, bhoot survives. Ma's tears are shed. Veils are kept. After Rati's revolt, I expect the latest hairdos on every buffalo's head. And I'll end with a poem that mentions my wife. I met my wife when I was a student at Georgia Tech, and she's a great cook. She cooks all kinds of things, but there's one thing that she doesn't cook, and that is chapati, which is like a naan or tortilla, but if you are from North India, you really want to eat that. And if your wife doesn't cook it, then if you're a poet, you write about it. And so the poem worked for a week, but after a week she stopped cooking this again. So this poem is about chapatis, and the title is A Wife Who Can Cook Round Chapatis. And this is going to be the last poem from me for today. A wife who can cook round chapatis. All I want is a wife who can cook round chapatis and lentil soup. Trust me, I am not a man of many vices, but chicken masala with precise spices must be served with mint raita, where yogurt is homemade, mint homegrown, and a hint of cumin. A dressing of cilantro, the tint that fills my eyes with memories distinct. And rice must be cooked in correct device. No microwave excuses. Only basmati, cooked on slow heat, till the last grain disappears, as my grandmother with rice between her wrinkled finger and thumb would portray it. I don't ask for much, but an Indian wife must do her task well. For if the husband is a god, his divinity depends on her devotion. This means the tea gingerly be made, boiled for a time in which pakoras can be fried. For it is a custom of a race, and these traditions must be sustained. I am a Pandit by birth and deeds. I read hymns and philosophy called science, and I need bare minimum to survive. So all I want is a wife who can cook round chapatis and lentil soup. But if a Pandit must rise from chowki feeling honored and satisfied, a ball of kheer, or half a kg of jalebi or meetha, a sweet made with pumpkin, a Himalayan recipe that only my mother can teach. Which reminds me, please, I want a wife who can put into practice what my cooking mother has done well all her life, turning economic hardships into scraps of delight, wasting not a drop of my hard-earned cooking oil, turning leftovers into mouth-watering appetizers. Like, have you tried last night's chapatis fried? And I promise on my part, I will provide this wife every ladle, every utensil, every spice, and a kitchen complete in its austerity, sonnets for every dish, and my gut feeling is, I will love her, like only fed husbands can. I will love her with every spice, every kiss served with right music, knead joys into her hands, make her laugh as I bite, undress her concerns every night, and I will love her with a poet's rhythm and confess to her that she's the one I always wanted, and whisper, the wife who can cook round chapatis and lentils.